All right, so we've got a quorum, it looks like. So we will call this meeting to order. This is the Town of Richmond Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, January 3rd, 2023. So welcome, everybody. We have one member in our studio audience. And it looks like we have one member, Jeff, in our Zoom audience. So welcome, everybody. So we're going to review the agenda and make any adjustments to the agenda. Does anyone have anything they want to add? I would like to add an item 4B after the approval of the minutes. I just want to say a couple of words about the Dunkin question that has been a big topic on Front Porch Forum. So I just wanted to make sure that people kind of had a basis for talking about Dunkin' Donuts or understood why other people were talking about Dunkin' Donuts. So that's going to be 4B if nobody has any problems with that. Very short. And then our main item is going to be the discussion, continued discussion, hopefully getting down to finalizing the Village and Gateway residential commercial districts. Okay, hearing no comments, we'll proceed with that agenda. Any public comments on items that are not on the agenda? Okay, so everyone is good with that. We'll move on to item number 4, which is the approval of the minutes of December 7th, 2022. Are there any adjustments, additions, corrections, changes that people would like to make to those minutes? Okay, hearing none, we will accept those minutes into the record as written. Thank you, Revy. That's his last set of minutes. So Duncan Wardwell, our assistant to the town manager, is going to be taking the minutes tonight and on into the future till we get a planner. All right, so before we jump into our main topic of discussion, a short word about Dunkin' Donuts or Dunkin', since it seems to be so interesting to people. It came up originally because it was mentioned as a possible eatery in the mobile station out at exit 11. So what has happened to that mobile station is the owner has received all the permits that they need to do a renovation to that formerly called gas station, now called vehicle fueling station. And what they were approved for included a small percentage of their floor space as an eatery within the convenience store, something that could either make food to go or to eat in. So their approval does not restrict the kind of eatery that can go there. The developer of that property, the owner of that property, has stated that they wish to have like a mom and pop operation or manage it in-house, but they are not restricted to that. They can have a Dunkin' Donuts, they could have a Subway, they could have a branch of Papa McKee's, they can have any kind of eatery. They are not restricted to what they can have there. The mobile station is not in the gateway. Last year, we reassigned the mobile station to be with the other businesses that were at exit 11. So it's in an industrial commercial district with the other businesses, everything that surrounds exit 11. That seemed to us a better way to describe what happened with that mobile station. So what we talk about when we're talking about the gateway doesn't apply to that. That's over and done. That district has been reformulated with the mobile station. The mobile station has all its permits to renovate. They're never going to be able to make a bigger footprint because they're in a wetland, but they are able to put in any kind of small eatery that they want. So that's the situation there in case that comes up again. If you're talking about a Dunkin' Donuts somewhere else in the village of Richmond, that is not in the same category as the one at the mobile station. Jeff?
I'd like to add to that the owners or the developers of the mobile station appealed the permit that was one specific permit condition that the DRB put on their permit, and it had to do with formula businesses. So they appealed that and were successful in their appeal. So the court decided that the formula business restriction on that particular site was not allowable. So that might be relevant to the discussion tonight.
Yeah, Jeff,
Yep.
do you have some more
They have their
information about that?
permits. That's why they have their permits, because it was appealed. The developer
that's correct.
won, basically, so they can put anything they want in. Joy?
Hey, Virginia, I just want to understand what the purpose of talking about this is. It's not for addressing the mobile station, because there's nothing we could do now, right? I mean, they've already
Right.
applied for the permit. Okay, so then it's
Totally.
just for the gateway and the village. It's just to continue on.
Talking about formula
Other-
businesses. Yeah,
Okay.
it doesn't have anything to do with the mobile station. That's over and done. They can put the Dunkin' Donuts in if they want, or
I'm
anything
aware
else.
of that. I'm aware of that. I'm just not sure other people who might read the minutes or watch this are aware that that is the fact. Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Does
you.
that seem clear enough?
And maybe I shouldn't use the word fact today. All right, thank you.
Chris?
So I guess it is important for us to understand the nature of the decision, though. You know, if we proceed, if we want to impose formula business restrictions or something like that on the town through subsequent action, you know, I imagine that one of the reasons that they that the mobile station went on appeal was that there is no other formula business restriction on anywhere else in town. And so, you know, it was sort of probably seen as being a exceptional application on the part of the DRB. But that would be different if we put the restrictions in more generally in town. But I'm not a lawyer. It would be good to have a lawyer take a look at that and, you know, understand what the precedent of this is.
So you're suggesting that a lawyer take a look at what?
Well, I guess I'm suggesting that the first step would be, is there, did the court issue something in writing that we can look at with regards to the mobile station appeal?
Yes,
I
there's a written decision. Yep.
can speak to that a little bit. So, you know, the town lawyer was involved in that particular decision. And he advised us that it would not be fruitful for us to fight that appeal.
Right. No, I understand that, but I want to understand the basis for the court of granting the appeal.
You know, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn. He said both that you know, there wasn't any basis in our zoning, but also that it wasn't likely that that type of provision would be, you know, successful for us to fight the appeal.
No, I understand that, but it would be, is there a way to get a copy of the well, I guess of our lawyers? We could have both the you know, the statement from the court accepting the appeal, and then our lawyer's opinion.
There were
Yes,
also,
they did write an email on it.
there were multiple reasons that the appeal was successful. That what the DRB, their decision-making process was flawed. So there were a number of different ways in which it was flawed. So you can look at that if you want, but it was not necessarily just the formula part of it. It was there were some other things. Anyway, you will be able to look at that. That's fine. You can look at that decision if you want. The lawyer has looked at it. Lisa,
Yeah, can you hear me okay? Can you hear me?
yes, we can hear you. You could speak
I'm having a little
quickly.
trouble with something. I don't know what, but that kind of time. You know, that decision, I think, impacts directly our village commercial in terms of food, grocery stores, some of those definitions. I think we were unhappy with the prospect of formula businesses, you know, as such, popping into that zone. But so it sounds to me like we'd better define that better for any place where we've got a concern about formula businesses being unhealthy for the town. So, you know, I guess better to know now than down the road. Is that true? Do we have do we need to?
Yeah, so we're going to talk some more about formula businesses tonight. We had, if you recall, on the Planning Commission decided that we were only going to talk about things that affected the district that was under consideration. That we didn't want to make too many broadly applicable to the whole town decisions when we were only talking about one set of districts, two districts in this case. For instance, do we want something to apply to the AR, the Agricultural Residential District? Well, people aren't here from that district who might be interested in it. So we made this decision when we were talking about the non-developable portions of a lot, that we were only going to apply it to, for now, to the districts about which we were talking. So in this case, we're going to talk about formula businesses in relation to the districts that we're talking about, these two AR districts. We're not going to make a blanket statement that affects the whole town, or even the industrial commercial districts where we might want to allow formula businesses. We don't know. We may or we may not. Or the agricultural residential district. We're not going to talk about them right now. We're going to tailor our restrictions to the districts that we're talking about, because people have become interested in those districts and they're the people, you know, who are most likely to be affected, not some other people who are going to come back later and say, well, you never told us you were going to talk about this in relation to the AR district, if you see what I mean. So we're going to talk about formula businesses in relation to, and we can put it in other districts if we want, when we come to talking about those districts. This is part of the procedure of talking about one district at a time, so that people can grapple with one chunk of the zoning at a time, rather than trying to redo the whole zoning all at once, which didn't work out too well in 2012. Chris.
Yeah, so two things. One is I completely agree that we need to set up our process so that the people who live in the districts have the ability to attend meetings and understand that we're talking about their district, you know, live or work in their district. So I definitely support that. However, I think that for formula business, and possibly for other things as well, because this is not the first time that we've come upon topics that where the question has arisen of whether this is something that makes sense to only consider as on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis or on a whole town basis. There needs to be a category, you know, sort of a holding category for things that maybe should be considered on a whole town basis, so that we don't lose track of them as we go through on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis. And so the question gets asked is, does this topic, should it be also included in this neighborhood, you know, each time? I think the other one that I recall us having a similar discussion on was about and this is a while ago, so it's not really relevant anymore, but it was about solar access, or solar ready requirements and whether those should apply townwide. But I do want to say one thing that I've said before, just repeat again, it makes little sense to take a formula business approach that is patchwork. If you provide opportunities, and again, I don't actually have strong feelings about Dunkin' Donuts. My concern is about retail groceries. But if you provide the opportunity for there to be a store that sells non-perishable food items, on the formula business model in Richmond, it kind of doesn't matter where it is. It will still have the potential impact of driving the Richmond grocery out of business. That's the problem. That's the whole reason for wanting to address this in the first place. And then, so that's all the first item. The second item is just how, Virginia, you said that we will have the opportunity to look at the court's decision and the lawyer's opinion. How do we do that? Do you know?
How do we do that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, are these posted on the town website? Is this in the proceedings of the select board, Jeff? I mean.
So it's,
Yep, I would assume it's in
I can
the
speak to that
select
a little
board.
bit.
Yeah,
Duncan, you should probably check with Josh about, what can be released out of executive session. I don't think executive session is relevant anymore. What's done is done. Whether what was given directly to the select board is passed over to the planning commission, or the planning commission asks the town lawyer, what the basis of their decision is, that you could do one or the other, I would think.
okay. So we'll just make sure, Chris, that we give you a way to look at that decision.
And I would caution you to not. So, I think that where this it does matter in the discussion tonight, the basis of formula businesses. I think where it fits best is in definitions. And that's a whole different conversation than what you're having tonight. So, you might want to bring that up at a later date under definitions and also when you have, information from the town lawyer as well.
Yep, so we're going to talk in a little bit about formula businesses, Chris, but there's a couple of other things that I think maybe we can get out of the way first before we start talking about that and the approach that we are taking to the formula business question. So if it's okay with you, we'll just put that on hold for a few minutes and see if
I'm sorry, this isn't about formula business per se. It's about access to information, and I didn't introduce this topic at this time. I would like to make a request that the planning commission formally request that the select board release to us the written decision of the court and the opinion of the lawyer, because it sounds like they were handled in executive session, which we would not naturally have access to. And I think if it's relevant to this ongoing discussion. So I'm concerned that if we don't follow through on this, it's a good chance we won't actually get to see it.
Yep, okay. We'll see what we can do and get as much information as we can get. So, yeah, we'll go from there. I mean, a lot of that, the reasons that it was turned down aren't necessarily relevant to this conversation, but we'll get the information and get to the planning commission members as much information about it as we possibly can.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of other things that have come up before talking about formula businesses, because that's clearly going to be the longer part of the conversation. If we could, I'm hoping that over our next couple of meetings, we will be able to finish these two districts. We need to finish them. There are things riding on them being finished, and we have a lot of other things that we're being importuned to do as well. So I think we need to try to get these issues resolved as quickly as we can and move it over to the select board. So. All right, so following up from our last meeting, multiple structures on a lot. Let's see if we can get that out of the way. This is the question about whether, without subdividing a lot, you can put two residential structures on it. So what we're proposing is that be allowed. If you look into the language for both of these districts, we are proposing that two principal structures hosting residential uses may be developed. Basically, it's like putting a duplex, only not requiring that they be joined together in a duplex form. It's putting two housing or residential units on a single property. And this is not going to change the fact that the density requirements have to be met, the acreage requirements, all of the parameters of zoning in the particular district, they all still have to be met. So it doesn't increase the density. There's nothing different about it, except that it allows you to have the two structures on the same lot. And we are proposing, if you look at either one of these two districts under multiple structures on a lot, that the legal arrangements relative to the ownership of these structures, if they're owned by different people on the same lot, for instance, the proposed legal arrangements for ownership and management of all structures, uses, and any common land on the lot shall be provided in the permit application. So this is to answer the concern that people have that there's going to be confusion if there are two different owners owning these two different structures on the same lot. So we are requiring that they propose all of their, it's at the top here on the screen, but the whole paragraph is in both, we're proposing it for both of these districts. So hopefully everybody has reviewed this, and you're going to ask your questions that you have about it or concerns that you have about this. We had last week, there were three proposals on the table. One is that we don't do this. One is that we do it only for residential structures. And the other is that we do it for any kind of commercial or residential structures. We limited it to residential structures, so there can be more than one residential structure on a lot. And we have made it applicable to this district because this language is included in each district. If we want to apply it town-wide later, when we talk about the AR district, we can also put this language into the AR district. So we can plug this language into whatever district we decide should have it. You know, it may be the case that it's good to be doing it town-wide, but we can do that district by district. Joy.
So I'm just realizing that I missed a meeting while I was away, I think right before Christmas. Who's the we when you say we did this? Was it after the meeting you guys decided this, or at that meeting you decided it?
So we took, Revi and I worked together to present the three options that we could think of.
Okay.
Took, testimony from people. People spoke at the meeting for it, against it, problems, concerns. So we took that. that outreach effort and put it into the proposal that seemed to us to meet the outreach the best.
Okay.
So that's what's in this. So when I say we, it's mostly Revy and I, but taking the testimony that was brought and planning documents. Revy reached out to the Planners Association, to neighboring towns, to CCRPC. We took feedback from other towns as to whether they do this or don't. Some towns do, some towns don't. We asked them what problems they saw with it. They didn't find that they had problems with it. So that was also added into the mix for this proposal.
Thank you.
Yep. Anybody have concerns about this or questions or? Chris?
I like it. I've generally always felt positive towards this. I just I'm still not quite sure I understand how this works in practice, though. I'm just sort of like trying to play this out in my head. You've got, let's say, two scenarios, right? One is an undeveloped lot, and so in that case, you if a party buys the lot and we could build 2 houses on it and sell one of the houses to somebody else, but retain ownership of the lot. Is that correct?
Yes.
And
So it's
does,
like, that would be like a condominium. It would be condominiumized, which is what a condominium is you just own your little piece, your apartment or your dwelling structure, but you don't own the land, basically.
got it. And then, would that also be possible for an existing home on an existing lot? Would this allow basically the building of a second structure that then could be sold as a condominium?
Mhm. It could be sold or it could be retained, either one.
Right.
This way of arranging it seems to satisfy the people who want an accessory dwelling, but who would then like to sell it perhaps to somebody else.
Right.
You could
That
have
was,
that,
I mean, yeah, okay.
and then, or somebody who wanted to put, a second, somebody who wanted to increase the ability of people to have ownership of an apartment or a house, to start in the wealth building of owning. So that was brought up by Gary last time, is that, if we want to increase home ownership, this is one way to do it, because now you can put 2 houses up and you can actually sell the other one.
Got it.
So
Are there any issues with, or anything that needs to be paid attention to with utility service to the secondary or the condoized structure? If those, because at some point there's the transition between the town ownership for sewer and water and Green Mountain Power ownership or Vermont Gas ownership, onto the property, and then the utility infrastructure is owned by the property owner. Is there anything we need to be paying attention to in the context of this kind of arrangement?
Well, so Revy's opinion was that in the statement that says proposed legal arrangements for ownership and management would include that kind of information. We could certainly run it by the water and sewer department, the utilities, perhaps, a lawyer, perhaps. Certainly Josh could give an opinion as to whether there was difficulties. If people
Well,
are generally in favor of the concept, then that would be you know, this is conceptual. If people are in favor of it, then we could ask those utilities if this doesn't cover it, the fact that those arrangements must be stated in the beginning.
Right, right. Or just see how, like, it sounds like you've already done to some extent how other towns that have taken this path have dealt with this. Because it seems like it would be a general issue, nothing specific to Richmond.
Right. Mhm.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions or concerns? Allison,
Yeah, I would just be interested to know some legal opinions about what could happen in terms of confusion as a result of somebody else owning a property or owning a building on property that's owned by somebody else. And there are certain access issues and use of surrounding land, whatever. At its basic presentation, it sounds like a good idea, but I could envision how it could be a mess. And I guess I'd be interested in what some lawyers or a lawyer who deals a lot with real estate would have to say about the possible problems that could result from it. Now, it's not that I'm looking for trouble, but it seems like it's a little unclear to me also what the difference between this and a subdivision is. It certainly has impact on the density of a certain area. But on the other hand, you know, I could see a lot of circumstances where it could work out fine, but there might be places where we need red flags, and I'd be interested in getting a little more information about that.
Can I make a comment on, or maybe help shed a little light on that for Allison?
yeah, sure.
Sure,
Joy.
yeah.
So Allison, this is very similar to what we allow other places, which is through a PUD,
Yes.
right? So it's no different than that, really, when you think about it. It's one piece of land with different buildings on it, and they can be owned by different entities.
Mhm. Okay.
So we already do this.
Well, maybe we do already do it. It just looks like something else. But I don't know. I
It
guess
happens, banks can finance it, it gets a little tricky, you know, but I'm just saying, it's not like it's some crazy notion, it's happening all around us.
I wasn't implying that. Thank you, Joy.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, one has to be careful about the arrangements, and you have to make the arrangements clear what the ownership is, but those are not insoluble problems, so.
Mhm.
Any other questions or concerns about that? Are people ready to go forward with that conceptually? You know, if we run it by the lawyer, so the whole set of documents is going to go to the lawyer before we actually vote to approve them. But once we have conceptually approved everything in them, we can send them to the lawyer. And then if they're okay with the legal review, then we're going to approve them if we've conceptually approved them first. So what I would like to do is to get rid of these topics one by one. If people don't have concerns about them, that you're ready to approve them once the legal review has happened. Lisa. Lisa, you're muted. If you're speaking, you're muted.
I'm not muted.
That's better. That's good.
Yeah, we seem to have a lot of times where the legal opinion is starting to, you know, tip the scale one way or the other. So I guess I would say, let's go get it. What the heck? And, you know, maybe save ourselves some time in the long run, get it earlier than later. If we have enough information for a lawyer, for the legal opinion to actually be rendered, then we should proceed with it. If we don't, well, then, what do we need? Maybe the lawyer should say, here's what I need to hear or need to know fact-wise and detail-wise, and we'll fill those in if necessary. And then we get the legal opinion. Otherwise, I think we're going to keep having this question come up until we get it. So let's get it.
Yeah, well, we did submit most of this material to our lawyer and he was
Mhm.
fine. There were a few comments that he made about wording, but there were no actual issues. Some of the things we accepted and some of the things we thought were unnecessary changes. Revy and I, speaking for, and Chris Cole worked on some of these. So, we don't anticipate, we are making some changes, so we're just gonna now ask him about these changes, so.
Okay. Down the road, Virginia, just one follow-up question. Down the road, is there lingering liability to the town for having made, say, a bad decision, 5 years ago on these sorts of shared properties or multiple units on a lot that comes back to haunt the town, or does that become the owner's problem or someone else's problem? And maybe nobody can answer that, but I'd be curious.
Well, it would be, like the PUD situation. I don't know.
Yeah.
Are there
Yeah.
lingering problems that the
No.
towns that Revy and I asked about this, that Revy asked about this, didn't seem to have anything to say about that. So
Okay.
there were lingering problems, so,
Okay. And for Joy's point, there's been a lot of
We
PUD.
already allowed duplexes in the property. This is just like allowing a duplex that's not joined together. Why would you not do that? So,
Mhm. Okay, well, I'll take the hopeful side then.
okay. Anybody else? So Lisa, would you be willing to vote to approve this? Multiple structures. Are you ready to vote to approve it, or is there some other information that you feel you would need?
I don't think I'm going to learn anything more other than legal clarification, maybe. Lawyers are not famous for being, clear and brief. So to wait for something that is satisfying and comprehensive doesn't serve the interest of moving us along. So I would be okay with it.
Okay, good. Okay, so I think that based on what I'm hearing, we're going to leave it in this proposed draft
Yeah.
the way we have it this time and go on to the next item.
Virginia, can I ask a more
Sure.
basic question?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
I was
Adam.
doing the maps to propose the proposed new district, and I just noticed that portions of Jericho Road were omitted and included, and couldn't wrap my head around the chronological order of those maps and what was kind of what the proposed map was now.
Okay, so the proposed
And I saw
map,
your note, but I just without a map.
Yep.
I wasn't entirely clear.
okay, so we can talk about the maps. We have a map for the gateway, a map for the village. The map, and they're in the packet this time. Maybe Duncan, you could pull up the map for the village, which does include both sides of the Jericho Road.
I missed that map, so that
Yep.
would have clarified my question.
Yeah.
so,
We have gone back and forth.
Okay.
I agree. We had the
Yeah,
both
I
sides.
couldn't Figure out where it had been settled on.
Yeah, we had both sides. We have heard from people who are for and against both sides of the Jericho Road. And the rationale for including both sides of the Jericho Road is we have very limited amount of commercial space in Richmond and limited multifamily housing. So
Yeah, I mean,
this
I'm-
adds
I
to
had
the
got
area.
map, So we own a property I was trying to say this months ago or whatever.
Yeah.
We own a property at 280 Jericho Road that's undeveloped, so we were very excited for this. We've opened up some nice options with the shape of the lot to have a duplex that was
Yeah.
attached and it was, and then I had noticed that based on the maps, it may or may not be included, so I was just trying to clarify that. So it would be very.
Yeah, so-
Pro having included on both sides of the road all the way up. just
Right,
to
so we
clarify
can
my-
talk about that now with the planning commission. Is the map, are
I
the
don't know
maps
why,
on there?
yeah, I remember seeing the maps, but now I'm not
Wait.
finding them.
Yeah, so. So the map,
I'm glad I'm not the only one that missed this.
here's the map. We'll give it to Adam. He can actually look. Go ahead.
I know we had those.
So
numbers,
let's
man.
talk about the maps for a minute. Let's talk about the village map, including both sides of the Jericho Road up to School Street. Does anyone have any comments that they want to make about that? We have heard people who are interested in it, and we have heard people who would like it to remain a neighborhood, part of the neighborhood, you know, the Tilden Baker neighborhood that backs up to it. So this is one property deep on each side of the Jericho Road. We are interested in those properties being able to have multifamily housing, being able to have commercial compatible businesses. It is on one of the main arterials, which we have felt is a place where a business could succeed in Richmond. The traffic on Jericho Road has come up a couple of times. A lot of the traffic on Jericho Road is a function of the schools and the delivery of children to the schools, which we feel should not be addressed by your zoning policy, but it should be addressed by the school and the busing situation and how we arrange that, whether we arrange transit for students to reduce the traffic there. Also, if we add multifamily housing to that area, those children are going to be able to walk to school. So, the only additional comments that have come in since then are whether or not to include the ball fields, the 4 acres that belong to the town, used by the school for ball field and for recreational purposes, whether to include that in the district to allow multifamily housing there. That's a question that seemed like it was, oh, good. On map.
That came up
It
here.
seemed like it was beyond the scope of right now dealing with this district, but that we could deal with that when we come to the neighborhoods, for instance. So here's a map you're looking at, including both sides of the Jericho Road. And there are a few other areas that we added to the already existing RC district. We added the Goodwin Baker building that is very interested in being able to have housing in that building, which seems like a good place for housing. So we added that to this RC district. Some of the properties on West Main Street, and then some of the properties across from the Round Church Corners complex, which of course is the commercial district. It's not an RC district. Other than that, most of the land that's in yellow here on this map was already in the pre-existing RC district. Anybody have any question about that, commissioners? I mean, I know we've talked about including them, not including them, including partway up Jericho Road on the east side or the south side. Is everybody happy with this map?
Virginia, where does that end? Right before the interstate on Jericho Road? Like, why wouldn't we go all the way up to the interstate?
That lot,
Good question.
Last piece is actually owned by the interstate.
yeah, there's a big interstate right of way.
Okay.
Some of those lots also have wetlands and high slopes on them, but enough land that you can work around. Can you show the planning commissioners, Duncan?
Yeah, I'm trying
So-
to get, for some reason it's not loading it.
Okay, so I can't see anybody's hand right now. I can't see the people on the Zoom call. So if you have something to say, you'll just have to speak out.
Virginia, can I ask a question?
Yes, Lisa.
Okay, thanks. I don't know if we've resolved the question or questions that kind of were hanging in the air about Airbnbs and that sort of usage in that zone. Maybe this isn't the time where we fine tune it to that degree, but on the other,
Airbnb is on our short list of things to talk about when we get done with this.
okay, well,
project
I'll hold my
engaged in.
ear until then. Okay.
Yes, please, get your thoughts together for Airbnb, coming right up in the near future.
Okay. Hear you.
Mark your calendar. Anybody else? It's everyone happy enough with this map that you would vote to approve it if we were ready to approve it? Or do you have other concerns or information that you need beyond what we have already? Okay. So I'm not hearing any, so I'm going to assume that people are good with this map.
Mhm.
All right. So let's move on to the next thing on our list, which is relatively small, which is the powered vehicle service. So this is like repair shops of cars, you know, body shops, stuff like that. We did agree to delete it from the village.
Yes.
There seemed to be enough people who were not happy with having this in the village RC district. So we deleted it. And because we deleted it from this version that you're currently looking at, we also deleted the standards that we had made to try to make it as an acceptable, good neighbor to people. We didn't think we need them. We don't have them now. This use already exists in the several districts. We left it in the gateway because we felt that our development standards for screening and so forth are adequate. The other standards that we have that aren't specifically related to powered vehicle service were enough in the vehicle, in the gateway, to protect the neighbors there. So this version has it taken out of the village, the standards that we put up taken away, but it is remaining as a conditional use in the gateway. And there's also pre-existing powered machinery in the gateway at Rod West's. There's no pre-existing in the current RC district. There's no pre-existing powered machinery service, so. Any comments about that?
No, but can we go back to that document that has the changes that we're supposed to be reviewing right now, or the topics?
Oh, yeah. which one?
Right now, we're just looking at the town website.
The memo,
Yes, please.
okay, we got the maps. Can we go to the memo?
Yeah.
Is that the one?
Just the one you wanted.
Okay, so B is the powered vehicle. Is that what you're referring to, Joy? Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah, just to kind of keep us on track here of what we're going through. Thank you.
Okay. So, and are you good with that, Joy? Having it in the gateway, not having it in the village?
Yeah, I don't know why it was moved from the village, but it doesn't bother me. I understand probably what the concerns are, but I'm glad that it's still in the gateway per Rod's request.
Yeah, I mean, my personal opinion is it could be made into a good neighbor in the village, but it seemed like there was enough negative feeling about it that we took it out. Okay, so that was B on the memo. C, we already talked about the Jericho Road. Okay, so we come down to things that are related, kind of related to formula businesses. One, so the kind of businesses that are formula businesses, retail, pharmacy, grocery stores, hotel, motel, restaurants. Those are the things that are generally talked about when people are talking about formula businesses. So for each one of those different kinds of formula businesses, we have approached it in a slightly different way, although there are many similarities about the way we've approached the different formula businesses. The legal advice is that you can't just ban formula businesses. You just can't do it. We don't want to go there to just ban them. So we're taking this approach of restricting the kinds of things that we can legally restrict. We can restrict the size. So we're introducing this concept of village scale businesses. We have in your packet, there are village scale versus large scale for retail, village scale for large versus large scale for pharmacies, and village scale versus large scale for grocery stores. We have not used this for restaurants for reasons that we can go into in a little while. So we can leave restaurants out of this discussion for now. So in your previous packets for previous meetings, we had the retail definitions, large scale versus small scale, with 5,000 square feet being the difference between a village scale building and a large scale building. We had the grocery store definitions divided into retail, into village scale versus large scale. And we are now proposing to add pharmacy definitions along those same lines, where you either have big pharmacies or you have village scale pharmacies of 5,000 square feet or less. And the thinking being that scale, since that's one of the things that you are legally able to control with your zoning, is useful here, because village scale is small buildings, it's not big buildings. And the other things that you can control are about the appearance of the building. The architectural features, the parking, the landscaping, those things you can restrict, where you cannot restrict the ownership, or whether it's owned by someone who owns 10,000 restaurants or two businesses or 2,000 businesses. You are not in Vermont allowed to restrict on that basis.
Mhm.
So the new thing that was added to this package of materials are these pharmacy definitions, because we understand that many people in Richmond would like to have a pharmacy. They would like to see a pharmacy either in the village or in the gateway. So we are proposing to allow village scale pharmacies in the village and in the gateway, 5,000 square feet or less. And they are also restricted as to the amount of food that they can have in them in order to address the food desert question.
Yeah.
So, and going on, I did some investigating into some of the pharmacy chains, which seems to be the only way you can have pharmacies for the most part. Walgreens website is touting its small format stores, which seem like exactly what we would want in Richmond, which is a 4,000 square foot, only selling drugs and health and beauty supplies, with a pharmacist that's, friendly and useful. So with that kind of concept in mind, it seemed like that would be something that people could get behind, having one of those small format or village scale pharmacies, either in the gateway or in the village. And we have development standards besides the scale. We have our development standards, which require no parking in the front in the gateway. This, we're trying to be as discouraging as possible to formula businesses without just saying you can't be a formula business. We are being as discouraging as possible. 5,000 square feet cuts out a lot of businesses who don't want to be under 5,000 square feet. No parking in the front, brick, stone, or wood in appearance. Pitched roof. A facade with windows and doors, landscaping. We have signs in place already in our sign ordinance. Yeah, that's good. Signs have to be small. They can't be higher than 10 feet off the ground, so they can't be large. They can't be internally illuminated. So that's another way to discourage businesses where that is part of their business model. So putting that information together, those types, those three types where we have a village scale definition. And of course, this could be added to any other district. When we take up the AR, we could decide, okay, we only want village scale grocery stores out there, or we don't want them at all. We can ban them. So what we've done here, so I made this list of the ways that we're trying to approach this formula business question. In the gateway, we had originally put in hotel and motel as a use based on not wanting that scale of business, which is going to be over 5,000 square feet. We just took hotel and motel out of the gateway. It was not allowed in the village to begin with. So that takes care of the formula businesses that would be hotels. They're just not allowed in either of these districts. Second thing, in the gateway, we're restricting the size to under 5,000 square feet for the grocery and the pharmacy uses, and we're not allowing retail. So retail village scale is allowed in the village. No retail use is allowed in the gateway. So that takes care of your basic big box variety type store. Banks, of course, are chains, but they're allowed. Nobody seems to mind those. And restaurants, auto parts stores, things that might be chains are just going to be controlled by the design standards. Signs are relatively small. There are parking maximums, which is felt in planning circles. You know, Revy was big on the parking maximums as a way to control the amount of parking, so you don't have a sea of asphalt. I have to say, I don't know a lot about parking maximums, and I have accepted the planning viewpoint on parking maximums. We've also, to Chris Granda's point about the fresh food deserts, we have required that if you sell food, you have to have 25% of your floor area in fresh or frozen food. In other words, you have to call yourself a grocery store, and you have to meet the grocery store standards if you're going to sell food. You can sell up to 2%, so you can have like a rack of chips and some beverages. But if you're going to sell any more food than that, this is to try to avoid retail stores coming in and saying that they're a pharmacy, for instance. If they sell food, they have to be called a grocery store, and you have to have 25% fresh food. That's new in this version. Pitched roof. And then we did add some non-regulatory character language into the features. In each of these districts and in all our other districts, we do have this non-regulatory language, which talks about the character of the neighborhood. Understanding that legally, if any of these things are taken to court, non-regulatory language doesn't really count. Your town plan has to be so specific to count. Your non-regulatory language has to be incorporated into your actual regulatory language. So, but we did put a statement in each of the features where we talk about what the neighborhood is supposed to be like, that at least has, you know, the kind of character of the neighborhood that we wanted to say, that it's a small town, that it has historic and rural roots, and you can read each, we put one statement at the end of each of the features of these two districts. So you can read those over, seem to encapsulate what people wanted to think their neighborhood was like. And there are those, the two statements that we put in at the bottom, understanding that these are not regulatory and may, you know, they may be referenced because we do have language in our conditional use standards that the DRB looks at that references the town plan and the purpose for each district. However, they only take you so far. What you really are counting on is your actual regulations. So for the gateway, unique commercial enterprises that define and promote the independent entrepreneurial economy of the nearby town center intermixed with housing. This constitutes the character of the area.
Virginia, can you see the hands raised?
Yeah, you got Joy.
I
Chris.
cannot see where are we
It's in the
looking?
upper corner.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, no, I couldn't see the hands raised. Chris, go ahead. You have your hand
Actually,
raised.
Joy was first.
Okay, Joy.
Thanks, Chris. So when we put a hotel in, I don't think anyone was under the impression that it was not going to be a chain. So now all of a sudden we're taking hotel out because we're afraid of having chains or so. And then the other thing is the only place that a hotel would really be able to go is in the area where we've selected as a larger, again, I own property in the gateway. I'm specifically going to be talking about my own property. I'm right now talking as a resident.
Yes.
The only place that would be able to go is 200 feet back from the road. And because it would be big enough for a hotel. A hotel is not going to want to go in anything smaller than 10,000 square feet, right? So we've taken it out because people don't want to have chains, which we all had to know that that was going to be a chain, right? I just am questioning how this was removed.
Yeah. Well, it was removed for the formula business concerns, but you know, I'm open to hearing why it shouldn't be removed.
I have a hard time with there's no place to stay in Richmond. Our next topic is going to be that we're going to limit the housing that people can rent out, right? Pretty sure that's where we're headed. We're going to start putting regulations on people having Airbnbs and VRBOs. So then where are people in Richmond going to stay? And not to say that I have any plans to put a hotel on our property, but I don't know. It just, it really, you know, we want people to shop and stay in town and come to Richmond. The only place to stay is if you rent out somebody's house, right? Which is great. But then if we're going to take that away, what are we going to give people? And maybe this isn't the answer. Maybe we could figure out another answer, which to me, I actually think there are other opportunities, but I need to hear that people are open to that. Like on a private property, being able to have 3 or 4 buildings where you can have little houses that people actually can go and get a permit and say, I am renting these out, or some other solution. But we can't just keep saying we're not going to allow anyone to have any place to stay that's visiting our town.
Okay, so I am hearing that you would like hotel put back in, basically. And
That or
good.
some other place for people to stay, but it sounds like we don't really, I mean, I get that the inns, but nobody's really doing that these days.
Right. Yes. We do have inns still allowed in both of these districts, but maybe nobody is doing that because they're doing Airbnbs. I don't know. So, okay. Got it. Chris,
Thanks. Just on that point, for the record, my concerns about formula businesses did not extend to hotels. I think there are issues to be addressed regarding hotels in each of the neighborhoods, but the fact that they might be part of a chain is not something that particularly concerns me. So just, just as someone who's spoken on formula businesses before. But specific to the, what's in here now for proposed size restrictions and fresh food standards. I guess, well, particularly what would happen? What does this imply about the existing market? Does that would that be a non-complying use?
no, the existing market is in the Village Commercial District. We will likely, almost certainly, allow large-scale grocery stores in the Village Commercial District because we already have one.
And so in that case, there would be no size restriction. It would be the only thing having the effect of the proposed formula business restriction would be the fresh food standard.
And any design standards.
Okay, but I
There
mean,
would
but
be no size
effectively
restriction.
those would be easy, probably easy to meet. Are you proposing also a definition for fresh food here? Because this is a fresh food standard, but you when you spoke about it, you said fresh and frozen foods. And what we've been talking about so far is really perishable foods, perishable and non-perishable foods. I mean, I think the thing that's relevant here is what is really shelf life, right? Because if we're talking about creating a opportunity for a grocery store not to carry produce, so fresh fruits and vegetables, that is where the problem comes in. So I think the definitions of what fresh food is are important.
So are you suggesting use of the word perishable? We do have dairy, meat, and produce, I think, in the definition.
Where are the definitions? Let's check that
The
out.
definitions are on 3 separate pages in the packet because they weren't put together. So under grocery store definitions proposed for 1/4/23, grocery store large scale, which would be in the commercial district, floor area 5,000 square feet, and 25% of the total gross floor area devoted to the sale of fresh or frozen produce, meats, or dairy products. And for village scale grocery store, the same thing, only less than 5,000 square feet or less.
All right, so in both these cases, there is no requirement that fresh, that perishable foods actually be sold because they could all be frozen, correct?
It could be frozen, yes. Yep.
Well, I would propose that that's got too much of a loophole in it, and that we remove or frozen from both these definitions.
Okay. So the definitions that we found that were related to this, like in the Kansas City case that our lawyers sent us to look at, they did have frozen in there as well as fresh. So you could also, I suppose, have 25% of the total gross area in meats and dairy products. no vegetables or fruits, but I
What would
I
that,
don't
what
know
purpose
that
would
we-
that serve?
well, that would be a way that you could, are you suggesting that we need more restrictions that require you to have fresh produce?
Yes.
Because I don't know that we want to be that restrictive. That we don't want to have, what if we want to just sell meat and dairy products, like Maple Wind Farm? I mean, they're not in this district, but you know, they don't sell fresh vegetables because they're not a vegetable store. They sell meats and dairy products.
Are they a grocery?
Well, they're not in this district and I don't know what, you know, they're a farm, so.
Yeah, I don't think that really applies. I'm sorry, Virginia, I'm missing, I don't understand the point you're trying to make. Why would that be? About meat and dairy, I'm not getting it.
Okay, so the point I was trying to make is you suggested removing the words "or frozen."
Right.
So what if the store wanted to sell only meats and dairy products?
Well, they would sell refrigerated, but not frozen meat and dairy products at a minimum of
So that would be
25%.
That would be okay with you, with no produce, no fresh produce, but they would just sell meats and dairy products.
No, because I mean,
Bother you, or does that bother you, or that doesn't bother
I mean,
you?
I wouldn't like that, but why would that? I mean, there's nothing in here that requires, the way that's written now is they could sell just meat or dairy, but it could be either fresh or frozen, okay?
Yeah,
Right? So that's no, what I'm proposing doesn't make it any worse from that regard. I mean, I think you're raising an interesting point. I don't think there's much danger in that happening. But I guess I'm still not understanding the point you're trying to make.
well, yeah. All right, let's forget that point. It's the point that you might not have any produce at all, so why does it matter if you have fresh or frozen produce? If you might not have any produce.
So are you
and-
saying that you want to amend this to require that they have produce of some
No.
sort? Because it doesn't do that
No, I
now.
don't want to require it, and I don't want to eliminate frozen either, because I think fresh frozen produce meets the goals of not having a food desert. If you have frozen produce, if you have frozen spinach and frozen peas, I think that meets the need of not creating a food desert. That's my feeling, but
Would you be happy with only having available in Richmond groceries that sold either non-perishable or frozen produce, meat and dairy? No, in other words, no fresh produce, meat or dairy.
I would probably shop elsewhere.
Well, that's my point.
But that doesn't mean that I need to require it for everybody. So. Anyway, we could look at some other definitions just to try to move this along. We could look at some other definitions and see if anybody else does or doesn't put frozen in there. And certainly consider taking it out and just having fresh produce, meats and dairy products.
Yeah, I mean, taking it out would in no way prevent a grocery store from offering frozen produce or meat or dairy, right?
Oh, yeah, right. Yep. And the grocery store in Richmond has much more than 25% in food, including those things.
Okay.
So we've talked to them about it. So that's where the numbers come from. So they could definitely still offer it. There's nothing that prevents it.
Yeah, I think what the point I'm trying to make here is that this is a situation where there is a history of formula businesses gaming the regulations by altering, sometimes cosmetically aspects of their stores to get around the regulations. And this is something that I deal with in a different context in my, professionally, is how do you design standards so that manufacturers or distributors can't comply with the word and not the spirit. You want to bring the word and the spirit of the regulation to be in harmony with each other.
Okay, does anyone else have any comments about this? Is everyone interested in taking out the or frozen? Yes, no?
You got Lisa with a question.
Okay, Lisa.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Virginia, as I recall, we got here in the first place a while back by trying to discourage formula businesses. So here we are kind of wrapping ourselves around the pole, like exactly how to discourage them. Exactly, are we discouraging too much, too little? Really what we're trying to do is head off a legal issue where we have a business coming in or wants to come in that we don't want. And sure, blatantly discriminate is probably the simplest way to do that, but that will fail. So again, maybe we need some legal guidance on this too. I'm frustrated, not frustrated, but I'm dismayed that we keep trying to tune this a little bit this way, a little bit that way, and maybe the big picture is not going to hold anyway. So let's maybe we should put this to rest for the moment and get a legal opinion that gives us maybe more guidance on a lot of things than we have right now.
Well, I'm not sure that legal opinion is going to be able to tell us whether frozen should be included with fresh or not.
Right. Well, yeah, if we have to, define it by 2 words, I think that's a misfortunate thing. But I'm concerned that in many, but several ways now, we are trying to anticipate the future challenges or the future bad actors, for lack of a better term, and head them off by putting specific language in our zoning regulations, when in fact we may fail on those for reasons we don't even know. I think we are struggling with terminology when in fact really we're a planning commission and we should be sticking to planning. I don't know if our efforts are all that productive in trying to exactly define uses and conditions without really knowing if they're sustainable. So that's just my thought. And it doesn't mean I like what we're doing, but I feel uneasy about where this could go once it leaves our hands.
Well, the details are, it is all in the details.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Yeah,
why
it
we're
is.
struggling with the details, is because you can't just ban them. And not
Right.
everybody frankly wants to ban formula businesses. Many
Right.
people use them. They enjoy them because they may
Mhm.
cost less. So, there are pros and cons. You can't just
Right.
ban them. That's it, not legal. So this is why we're taking the approach of putting the exact details into our
Mhm.
regulations that will seriously discourage them at least, if not prevent them. So, Chris.
Yeah, I think as the more specific we get, the more weaknesses we create by those things being linked. And those weaknesses can be attacked by somebody who's determined to force their business on us. Going back to the town plan, I mean, the very big overview, which is kind of mom and apple pie and difficult to say specifically anything about it, but Richmond's character is something that has endured, because I think in large part, and I haven't lived here long enough to really be able to say this, but I think because it's the character of the village has encouraged what we see today, which in turn encourages us to keep it that way. And I think we're trying to preserve that, however hard it is to describe. I don't get the sense that we're really fulfilling that mission, some of the language that we're trying to come up with, because it's too specific. But if it's not specific, then, anything will go. So I'm kind of wrapped around the pole here, and I don't think I can unwrap it tonight or anything, and I don't think we're doing anything wrong, but I don't feel really fulfilled with this. So I'll leave it at that.
Chris,
Elisa, I think you kind of put your finger on the essential conundrum for what
Yeah.
we're trying to do.
This
Yeah.
is why planners will always make money, because none of this can be completely defined. And
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that the threat posed by formula businesses is not theoretical. It's well
Right.
documented.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think, we can sort of say that's a fixed thing. And also the innovation and adaptability of that industry to take on the zoning ordinances of cities and towns to
Yeah.
be able to expand their businesses. That's also,
Right.
well
that's
understood.
what they do. Mhm.
The thing that we shouldn't fall into the trap of is not having the perfect solution, that we shouldn't at least try a good solution, in my mind. Because in the real world, the way this is going to play out is a dollar store or some other kind of store that would have a negative impact on the availability of fresh produce in Richmond, looking at a particular property and making a decision based on projected profits, whether or not it's worth it to take on whatever hurdles we've put in place,
Right. Right.
And I think what we want to do is put hurdles in place that are not necessarily the perfect ones, not necessarily the ones that we think are going to protect us in every situation, but will discourage as many of these kinds of businesses as possible from spending that money here, as opposed to going and spending it in some town that hasn't taken those precautions. So it's a classic not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good exercise, in my mind, anyway.
Burglars will pick the house that's unlocked.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Chris. That helps. And I know, I don't think we can solve this. If we could, we would really be geniuses. So we'd have towns flocking to us for answers.
Jeff, you wanted to make a comment?
Sure. I really appreciate the effort that you guys are putting into this. And, to Lisa's point, for better or worse, you're the best we got. The Planning Commission is the best we got at trying to grapple with these questions locally. And I think you're doing a good job of trying to interpret our town plan and put it into specific language. I was one of the people who initially proposed the formula businesses. And I think I've been convinced by Virginia, frankly, that being specific might be a better strategy. The language that you're coming up with here, less than 5,000 square feet, with conditions on what you can sell in the store, might be accomplishing what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And a store that's less than 5,000 square feet is not going to be selling a lot of stuff. And I, particularly for the uses that I'm most concerned about are retail, which it appears you've taken out, and grocery stores, which I think this language addresses my main concerns. So my sense of the only way that formula businesses that I've seen has been described is as character. And we all know what the character of the village is, but it doesn't really hold up in a legal dispute.
Yeah.
It's not, it's a difficult thing to prove. So this is a much more clear-cut way to prove the point. And I think it accomplishes what we're trying to do anyways. So, I'm supporting this approach.
Mhm.
Yeah, Jeff, just to answer, I mean, I agree with where we're headed in the sense that we need changes to the regulations. We need to allow for things or disallow things or limit things that haven't even been described before in zoning regulations. So yeah, this puts us way ahead of where we were some years ago, 5 years even. So yeah, I mean, if we're heading the right direction, that may be the best we can do. And we find the bumps in the road as we hit them. Okay.
Great, thanks. Yes, Allison.
Yeah, Jeff, I think you said that really well.
Mhm.
And I think I'd like to support your basic point of view. I also agree with Lisa that some of these criteria are so very specific that they appear to be possibly contrived, which I don't think they are. I think they were arrived at by trying to approximate what the desirable result would look like, and that how these things would be distributed. So I think we have to start somewhere, and I basically support what Jeff said.
Allison, how do you feel about frozen food in hotels?
Frozen food in hotels.
Well, how do you feel about frozen foods? Let's start there. Do you think
Frozen,
it-
okay, frozen foods.
Yeah.
I buy a lot of frozen foods, and I think that they have the advantage of being able to preserve vegetables and in particular, I guess, in meats that would spoil otherwise. So I guess I'm not against frozen foods. Does that mean that if you have a lot of frozen foods, you won't have much fresh foods? I don't know. What do you think?
It just means that you don't necessarily have to have fresh things. If you have 25% of your total gross floor area could be all frozen. So that's the question. Adam has a comment here.
I just want to speak to Chris's previous point about frozen foods. I think that, ultimately the goal is to set a hurdle that is just high enough to prevent a formula business without preventing other locally owned businesses, correct? That's kind of what we're going for, or you guys are going for.
Yeah.
Frozen hurdle is significantly lower than any actual fresh food. So it's not unreasonable to think that a formula, Dollar General would do the market research and think that it was worth it to cut their losses and sacrifice 25% of the store to frozen food. That's a much lower hurdle than 25% of the store to fresh food. And so I understand Chris's point that, the frozen food, adding frozen food does lower that hurdle pretty significantly. Whether that's still a big enough hurdle to prevent them, I think that's arguable. But it does lower that hurdle and make it somewhat feasible, I think, for that type of business to succeed by tossing frozen food that's never purchased on one or two walls of the store. So that was my.
So you'd take it out.
I guess I would. I guess I would pawn
You would
more
think
work
about
off
it.
on you to, as the commissioners, to research kind of what that ratio is and to see, what's a number that's solid enough. And I think that 25% is that number based on what you guys have researched, right? But I do see Chris's point. Maybe if you can include some combination of 25% of frozen and fresh food, just so there's not a total exemption from having. Then I guess that this opens them up to one head of lettuce, though. So you kind of are always playing whack-a-mole.
Right, or bananas,
Or
like
bananas, yeah.
Cumberland Farms.
What's the longest lasting?
Yeah. Okay. So I guess we'll think about that a little bit more. Chris, you had, is that a new hand or an old hand?
Well, Adam was pretty much just saying everything that I wanted to say, but I think that we pretty much covered this here, is that I think that if there's not a substantial, quote unquote, however you want to define that, whether it's 25% or 20% or whatever, requirement being dedicated to fresh food, you create the potential for a workaround, and, whether that's the token banana that we were just discussing or what, but the problem is that frozen is not perishable. And you can have a cold case that you stock, and the staffing that you do, the kinds of ordering that you do is substantially different than for a full service grocery.
Okay, anybody else want to weigh in on that? Those seem to be that and hotels. If anybody else wants to weigh in one way or the other on those two things.
You know,
All right, well, let's see if, oh, Allison.
yeah, I just had an idea.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, that because the point was just made that frozen foods are not perishable. And I think those of us who really do appreciate going to the grocery store and getting foods that can be perishable, but they're fresh now, or that if we allow, I think we need to consider that we really do want to have as much fresh produce as we can, at the same time knowing that things are in season or out of season, or availability is very changeable. I don't know, I keep coming back to the the numbers that you've approximated there. I mean, those are kind of approximations, but I don't think they're unfair. I feel like it's pretty good the way it's stated there, and maybe we should just try this, let it fly, and see how people react.
Okay, so you're in favor of leaving frozen in.
I leave it, well, yeah, I don't know. I don't think that frozen is necessarily going to squeeze out all fresh, but why don't we ask a grocer? I mean, why don't we talk? I just as soon go down to the local market and talk to somebody down there and ask them whether they think that would make a difference or not. I'd be willing to do that.
Well, I mean, I think the question is whether, the Richmond market has more than 25% in fresh food, produce, meat, and dairy.
Yeah,
They have
okay.
more than 25%,
Mhm.
not including their frozen.
Okay.
So they're fine with having, and it doesn't apply to them, this regulation anyway, because they're not in this district, but I think they would be totally fine with not including frozen.
Well, the only reason I'm thinking of talking to them is just that they're in the business. And those of us who are not in that business have less specific understanding about these issues. And be interested, I don't know, when you folks came up with these numbers, did you talk to them or people like them?
Yes. Yeah, we
Yeah.
talked to people at the IGA, who's the owner
Yeah.
of the market and the other 6 markets that they own. We did talk to them about the numbers. Of course, Dan Noyes, who owns the building that the Richmond market is in,
Yeah.
thought we shouldn't be restricting any of this, that he
Yeah.
says is the American way. We'll just
Yeah.
do whatever. So
Yeah.
it's a little difficult to talk to him about it, but
Uh-huh.
his produce manager gave us these numbers, which 25% is less than what they carry in fresh produce, meat and dairy. So anyway,
Well, I would say off the cuff that that's probably a really good resource.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't know.
They didn't have frozen in there in that number when we talked.
They
to-
didn't. Okay.
They had fresh.
Did they have any comments about the possibility of frozen? Or did nobody ask them that?
No, nobody asked them that exactly. So,
Yeah,
because originally we only had fresh in here. There was
Yeah.
no,
yeah,
here. But we added it because of other ordinances that we found. that
yeah.
included fresh, frozen,
Uh-huh.
frozen, fresh, if you want to look at it like that, food as meeting the nutritional requirements of people.
Yes,
Chris's point is that it doesn't properly discriminate against things that we might want to discriminate against. It doesn't have anything to do with the nutritional requirements of people exactly. So
right. Yeah,
Well,
anyway.
just because to clarify what I said is that the way that it's currently written with fresh or frozen would allow these groceries, both the large scale and the village scale, not to carry any fresh produce, meats or dairy. Okay, that's the way it's written now. Is that what we want?
Well, I think the Vermont farming community would probably like it if we limited it to fresh. Maybe, I don't know. I'm just thinking about people that I know who are in farming who would like to have their fresh products taken directly into
Mhm.
grocery. So maybe supporting our farming community would suggest taking frozen out as well. Lisa, you had something else?
Yeah, Virginia, right what you just said was what I wanted to head. Could we or should we or have a locally sourced portion of the market be set aside? Locally sourced, frozen or fresh, whatever, which would force anyone who comes in, even a formula business, to kind of support the local economy by buying some local products, frozen or fresh, in their market. Can we do something like that? Is that discriminatory to tell them where they're going to get their stuff or some portion of it? I think, the farmer's market, look how busy it is in the summertime. Sure, in the winter, it's not too busy right now, but so there would be a seasonal component to that just may not be possible in January, but May, June, July, August, September, October, November, maybe apples, oranges, but not oranges. All the banana trees that are growing around here, we have those locally. Yeah,
Well,
lettuce,
we might
all kinds of farms.
cause us to restrict it unnecessarily, I don't know that I want no fruit in the store in
Right.
in Vermont, we don't grow fruit too much, so.
This is true. Some of it can be stored. Apples do pretty well, but but back to what I was thinking, is there any maybe value to what we're trying to accomplish by having these grocery stores cater to the local providers, whenever possible, when they're seasonally available, when they have fruits and vegetables seasonally available, fresh or frozen? I just
Yeah,
want to put it out there, and that's all I have to say.
Go down that road,
Okay.
but something to think about, I guess. Allison,
well, I'm thinking along similar lines. Basically, I would like to support the local farmers as much as possible. And particularly as we see the decline in the number of farms in the state, I feel very strongly that we want, however we can, to support the local farms. That's all I wanted to say.
Agreed.
all right. Does anyone have anything to say about hotels? Are people good with putting hotels back in? Because the only place they could realistically be developed would be on the Willis Farm property. And if they were going to be bigger than 10,000 square feet, they would be in the back near the near the highway. So any opinions about that? People want to take it out, people want to put it in. What do you all feel about that? It doesn't seem like it's maybe the biggest concern in terms of formula businesses, although it was brought up as a formula business.
Just a quick comment. I think traffic access, to and from a property like that is going to be a little more complicated than usual. And the state doesn't seem to have any interest in bending our wishes on Route 2. So how would those things be provided for? I mean, if people try to come out of a hotel at 9 or 9:30 in the morning or 8:30 in the morning, and I'll head probably to the interstate, along with the traffic mix, the traffic slate around rush hour, it's going to be really difficult. We've already got enough traffic on Route 2. But anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Well, any increase in the businesses, or we're increasing housing density out there, we're allowing commercial opportunities, there will be some more traffic.
Sure, yeah. I mean, we're stacking things, and I'm not sure we see the full impact, but a hotel seems to be, I don't know if it'd be seasonal. I guess I don't really have a feel for what kind of clients the hotel would have or why they're here. I don't know much about that.
One thing,
right.
just to add to the discussion, and as I said before, I wasn't meaning to include any of my comments about formula businesses. I wasn't meaning to include hotels in any of my comments about formula businesses, but I think what is probably the case, that is, if you put a hotel in the gateway, that would kind of force the entire issue about water and sewer, and possibly in a way that could help solve the problem for the town. So I don't know. I guess maybe that would be, maybe having a hotel there wouldn't be a bad thing.
Chris, while you have the floor, how do you feel about perishable? The term perishable. It
I
looks
thought we were
like
talking about hotels. What are you talking about?
totally switching gears over to
You
the
guys better
other,
be nailed shut.
which is the food question. You want perishable, either fresh or frozen, according to Jeff in the chat. Perishable can be considered either fresh or frozen. Frozen food contains water, will quickly spoil at room temperature. Do you want us to put in perishable or not?
I just want it to be sale of fresh produce, meats, or dairy products. I just
Okay.
want to take or frozen out.
You want it to be fresh. You don't care that it's frozen. Okay. All right. Any other comments about hotels, or we're almost out of time? Hotels or
No.
food? Or how do people feel about the whole concept of having village scale versus large scale for these three categories? Are people good with that in general still? We have talked about it some before, but never really assessed the feelings of everyone present that this is a good way to go about it, that we have small scale that are village scale, and then we have large scale that could be allowed in some other areas as yet undecided.
Virginia, I think that helps support our definitions both ways by showing that we've considered, this and that. I think it enhances the restrictions. They're doing it that way.
Okay.
Makes it more supportable. It's not enhances.
Yeah, well, it's specific enough to be in the regulatory language, and it's something that we can ascertain.
Mhm.
It's not subjective. It is either 5,000 square feet or it is more or less than 5,000 square feet.
Right, and it shows we've considered that and the impact thereof, and it also shows we've tried to think about places where larger is okay. There's a lot for that too, so.
Right, and we will have a large scale grocery store in the village commercial because there's not many other places where it could go in the village commercial. When we come to the industrial commercial, we'll have to decide, do we want it there or not? Maybe we don't want it there and we just don't allow it there. So do we want it in the ag res? Probably not. So, all right, so we have 10 minutes to talk about anything else people want to talk about this package, the two districts and the tangential amendments that are needed.
I have a question about the pharmacy definition.
Yeah,
Would a store that sells only health supplements, vitamins and things like that, would that meet this definition of pharmacy?
a pharmacy or grocery store, which?
Pharmacy.
So,
Like a GNC.
Yeah, GNC.
I didn't really understand that. Could you just repeat that a little slower?
So there are stores that sell only supplements. So they're not selling prescription medications, but they're selling what is the definition under the FDA? There's things that are foods, there's things that are medications, and what falls under which is somewhat a term of art, which I don't claim to understand. So my question was, is if you're like a GNC, as Lisa said, and what you're selling is protein powder and vitamin C and things like that, do you meet the description of a pharmacy here?
Well, that's a good question.
Hmm.
And I don't know that.
I would hope that's retail because, yeah, not being prescriptions, they're food
Yeah.
supplements, they're not even food, really. They don't have nutritional value a lot of times, so. I don't know.
I think if we put this definition in the way it is, and some GNC came and wanted to set up shop, it would have to go under retail. There are not drugs or medications. So, but we could look into that. I think that's a good point. And the other question is about this cannabis, which is on our short list of things to develop, is retail cannabis regulations for when retail cannabis is legal here, if and when the select board would like us to have some ideas of what the zoning would encompass. So we put in that any establishments that sell cannabis products, thinking ahead, should not be considered pharmacies. We could take that out quite easily because we will have to address the whole cannabis issue, at some point, and then we could make any changes we want. There is a category of license in the Vermont cannabis statutes that allows you to get a medical dispensary license. So would you want to consider places that had a medical cannabis dispensary a pharmacy or not? Apparently, many of those are now going to start to sell retail recreational cannabis as well as the medical cannabis. So Revi thought it was a good idea to put this in, thinking of the future. I'm kind of either way on it.
I agree with Revi.
Is there a way to specify that establishments selling retail cannabis products should not be considered pharmacies? And that way, any cannabis dispensary that dispenses medical cannabis cannot automatically start dispensing recreational without re-permitting as a different use?
Well, that's true in the state
Okay.
regulations. You have to have a permit for retail, recreational, and you have to have a permit
So
for a
what
medical
you-
dispensary.
Town permit for a pharmacy and sell only medical, would that be an issue? And never sell any retail, just medical cannabis?
Well, not if we put this in here.
So
If we put it in here,
treat them as two separate things, so that someone. can
Exactly.
find a loophole by
You-
dispensing medical cannabis for a year and then pulling a state permit and starting to sell retail.
right. This prevents that. It cuts down the number of locations that cannabis can be sold, which some people are interested in doing. So, anyway. Anybody have any feelings about that, one way or the other?
Lisa's got her hand up. Lisa.
Oh, Lisa,
Yep, me again. I don't know if you've been to the Hannaford's over Junction, right off of Route 15, or whether it's Essex, whichever. I was over there 2 days ago, and I was in the Hannaford's, and I suddenly smelled marijuana, not burning, actual plant. It has a pretty distinctive pungent odor. And Magic Man across the parking lot, about 300 or 400 feet away from Hannaford's. And I'm sure that's what I was smelling, because I went outside and smelled it again. It kind of wafted as it does. I found that kind of objectionable. It's a strange odor to smell in a grocery store. I could smell it real well, and it wasn't coming from the back. It was coming in their ventilation system. So I had no idea that odors from retail cannabis shops would be so strong and widespread. So just wanted that way I think of it.
interesting.
Hmm.
Chris,
Yeah, I wouldn't say, I agree with where Revy went on this, and it's mostly based on what I think the expectations of town residents are going to be, I think what we don't want, well, what I don't want, let me put it that way, is for a medical marijuana dispensary to open in Richmond, to be able to open in Richmond by calling itself a pharmacy without the question of how being fully addressed, politically in the town, and certainly not for retail marijuana. And if I think we would be ill-served if we were to allow that to happen, unless state law is specifically allows it to do that. So I think people have strong feelings, at least my experience is people have strong feelings both ways on this. And it really, should have a complete and public discussion dedicated to it.
so are you in favor of leaving this language in, or do you think we should take it out for further discussion at some other time? We're, Revy
I'm in favor of
suggested
leaving
putting
it
it in there because we were
Yes.
setting up these definitions of pharmacies at this time, so,
Yes, I'm in favor of leaving it in.
okay. Jeff,
Just to follow up on this particular conversation, I don't think it'll matter one way or the other. I think it would be a real stretch for a cannabis dispensary to try to define itself as a pharmacy. It doesn't fit any of the statutory language around pharmacy. I don't think it hurts to leave it in. In fact, you might find you get more support having it in here, because I do think.
Yeah, though, Jeff, one thing in this, I wasn't going to go down this road, but this description of pharmacy is not aligned with any of the other statutory definitions of pharmacy. There's nothing here about employing a licensed pharmacist. There's nothing about dispensing, drugs is classified under the FDA. This is a Richmond specific definition of pharmacy.
I think you'd probably be wise to leave it in. I don't think it's going to hurt anything to leave it in. And, I doubt that they would try to do that, because you could challenge them on that too, so whether it's, in our zoning language or not, using the term pharmacy for a dispensary, I think, could be challenged but this would eliminate that possibility. I think that'd be fine.
Ms. Ra-
okay, any other, Chris, Granda, you had something else? Or
No,
is that-
sorry.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, so leaving hotel in, maybe we'll leave it in based on this conversation. And then we'll have to just kind of think about, probably taking the frozen out. We'll think about that a little more. Are there any other issues that we need to think about for our next meeting? What I would really like to do at our next meeting is to come to some kind of conceptual improvement of this language. And then before we actually vote to approve it, to give it to the legal, to our lawyer to look at. Or we could give it to our lawyer now to look at for a vote to finally approve it next time. If people were happy enough with it, you know, our lawyer's not going to have anything to say about whether or not hotels can be allowed or not allowed, or whether frozen can be in there or not. He's probably not going to, that's not going to make a difference in his opinion. So we could, if people are happy enough with it now, give it to the lawyer for any comments. And then we would be ready to have a final discussion and vote to send it on to the select board at our next meeting. What would people like to do? Lisa, you have a hand up.
That's a thumb, actually.
Oh, you have a,
Yeah, what
go
you just said, I agree. I feel the legal component keeps lurking over top of everything we've been talking about. I'd like to get some feeling that it's been at least considered, you know, by a legal professional. The rest of it, I think I'm okay with. There's always ways to improve things. I don't know what they are, but you know, they'll become clear. But I think we've done a really good job of capturing the primary needs and not being just open, you know, wide open about anything. So it's a good effort.
Okay, so you would be happy if we sent it to the legal review now and then had final comments next time with the thought that we might be able to approve it. Yes, is that
Yeah.
what I'm hearing you say?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Allison,
Well, I'd like to make a motion to that effect, that we send this as it is right now to our legal counsel, and that next time we come back and reflect on the comments and move it ahead.
okay. Lisa
Second.
seconds that. That's a motion. Does anyone want to talk about that motion before we vote on it? Chris, is that a hand up to talk about it?
No. That's
Okay.
it.
That's a hand up to move to adjourn. But anyway, we'll vote on this motion. People are ready to send this to the legal review, talk about the comments with the hope that we can finalize this and send it on next time. So I can't see you all for some reason, but we can see your name and a hand. So if you would do the hand raise thing from the reactions, if you're in favor of this motion.
Rich,
Uh-oh, the hand-
Shoot it up.
I have a
Yeah.
question. I have a question about the motion.
Okay, what's the question? Meanwhile, Duncan is trying to get the hands back, the people back.
Okay,
What's your
I'll lower
question,
mine then.
Lisa?
Okay, the question, we should probably give the lawyer a little bit more guidance on what we're looking for. I would like to know their opinion of the vulnerability of what is the most vulnerable portion of any of these draft ordinance languages, or phrases, whatever. Where are we weak? Where are we strong? You know, more than just a thumbs up, thumbs down. I'd like to know some degree of.
Well, that is his job, but we can
I
ask
know.
him specifically to tell us where he thinks we're vulnerable to any kind of legal challenge. That is what we generally ask him for.
Okay, well.
We don't want to put
guide us
ourselves
elsewhere, too.
in the way of having legal challenges. So hopefully he will tell us that.
Mhm.
Okay, so Chris and Allison both have their hands up. They're voting for this motion, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Anybody else want to put a hand up? I'm putting my hand up. Joy is putting her hand up. Lisa is putting her hand up. Okay, so the motion carries. I will get this, I have to get permission apparently from Josh to engage the lawyer.
Mhm.
But if we're comfortable that this is really pretty much what we want, then I think we're good to go.
It's our best effort.
So great. And final discussion next time. We've got we'll be reviewing the amendment report that Revy made up already for these two districts and these amendments. And I will also be preparing, hopefully with Chris Cole's assistance, the select board review sheet, which Revy has always made, pointing out all the differences for the select board's review. So there's a few things that we have to do there, but I think we will be able to do them even though we're on our own. So,
Move to adjourn.
yep. Is there a second? Joy, second?
Second,
Second.
third.
All in favor of adjoining? Thank you very much. Adjourning.
Thank
And
you,
great.
Tangential.
Good
Yeah.
night.
We'll see you
Adjourn.
next time. Our next meeting will be the regular third Wednesday, whatever that date is,
18th.
the 18th of January.
Be there.
Great. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Adam.